They've sold over 30 million albums to date. Their name and their song have become legend. October 20th, 1977, it all came crashing down. Today, their memory, their legacy, and that free bird are still flying high. This is Weekends with Whitney.
If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember?
Baton Rouge played a pivotal part in a shocking piece of rock and roll history.
Be traveling on now, 'cause there's too many places I've got to see. One of the great ones, Lynyrd Skynyrd. Let's hear it for them.
The band Lynyrd Skynyrd had just finished a concert in Greenville, South Carolina. They boarded a chartered plane to Baton Rouge to perform in a sellout concert at LSU's PMAC. Just 10 minutes from Baton Rouge, everything took a nosedive. Gene Odom was one of 26 people on that plane.
The engine would start spinning, and then the other one would start spinning. And then they would suck up some fuel. And when it sucked up the fuel, it would draw air. Then spin the damn plane sideways. Then, just what a damn nightmare that is at 10,000 feet.
Gene, head of security for the band, couldn't keep anyone safe now. He and others on that fateful flight, including lighting engineer Mark Howard, knew the plane had problems.
2 days before in Lakeland, Florida, when we left the show, after we loaded out, we got on the plane, we took off, and the right engine shot a 6-foot flame out of the back of it.
Roadie Mark Frank didn't want to get back on that plane either, and he wasn't alone.
People had brought up and were uncomfortable about it.
Their tour manager insisted on fixing the plane in Baton Rouge.
We're like, well, why can't the mechanic fly here and fix it while we got a day off instead of us going there, and him fixing it there while, it didn't make sense. It didn't add up.
It would take a strong person going back to that very day to go, I'm not getting on it, bye.
It's like, well, what are you going to do? This is your job. The show must go on, right? So, it's like, you want to fly home or you want to fly with us?
I put myself on that plane that day. If I didn't want, I could have gone home, I could, whatever. Nobody had a pistol to my head. I got on it my own free will. So I own that decision. But everybody, if I could take that day back, I would, But it was almost like this whole thing got started months ago. And it was big bucks. You got a tour going on.
Just 3 days earlier, the band released its new album, Street Survivors. In those 72 hours, the album was already gold.
People say they're gonna settle down. Don't see the faces and they don't come around. Well, I'm not that way. I got to move along. I like to drink and dance all night. From cool things not afraid to fight. You got that right. Said you got that right.
Baton Rouge radio personality Scott Ennis says Lynyrd Skynyrd was red hot.
To be at the pinnacle of a band's career, this was their 5th album. It was, and still is, the biggest album of all time for Lynyrd Skynyrd. They were at the height.
Lead singer and founder Ronnie Van Zant didn't want to cancel on LSU.
Ronnie knew that if they were to switch planes, it would mean canceling a few dates till they could get it fixed out. He said, there's no way we're going to give up 10,000 Southern rock and roll fans in Baton Rouge.
At 10,000 feet and 10 minutes from Baton Rouge, Mark was in the back of the plane playing poker.
And we always played poker back there. So we're playing poker, everything's great, and the right engine quit. Everybody goes, there goes that engine that there was a fault with. And so we continued playing cards, and it seemed to me like 2 minutes later, the left one quit. When the right one quit, Artemis came back and says, man, that engine went out. We're going, yeah, we know. So then the left one quit, and he came running back and said, man, we're going down, buckle up, buckle up.
Gene saw one glimmer of hope.
As we were coming down, the little John engine in the back, little 8-horsepower engine, was still running. That gave them flap control and hydraulic power. They were talking to Houston about getting vectors to the nearest airport. The nearest airport was Macomb. And so turn around and go to Macomb. And so they were, trying to, they did get the plane turned, but then the little John engine ran out of fuel. And that eliminated hydraulic power, flap control, and electrical power. And so we were coming down, and they wanted to try to make where we're at here, a field, plowed up field.
So we're going down, and somebody said, grab the chips. And I'll never forget, I stood up, and I said, F these chips, and I threw them across the plane, and I sat down, and me being the Catholic that I am, and I looked at Steve, who was across from me, and I said, Steve, I've never been this scared in my life. And he said, me neither.
Gene ran to the cockpit.
And I've been up there cussing them out a couple of times about telling them, I told you to stay on the ground back there and fix this plane. So they were hysterical, white knuckles fighting the plane, Go back and get everybody strapped in, whatever, we've got all that done.
Everyone except Ronnie, the lead singer. He'd taken 2 sleeping pills and was sleeping on the cabin floor.
And then I run and grab Ronnie up off the floor, shoved him between Alan and Gary, and he's so grogged out, so messed up with them 2 sleeping pills. Man, don't be messing with me. I got to get some sleep. What the hell, get the seat. And I grabbed him up under here, pushed him in the seat. I said, the plane's crashing, man. Don't be messing around, man. I got to get some damn sleep. And I put his pillow in his lap. I said, and I strapped the seatbelt on. I said, put your head down, man. The plane's crashing. Don't be mucking with me, man. Don't be messing around. I slapped him. I said, Ronnie, the plane's crashing, man. I'm telling you, dude, put your head down.
I had already accepted my fate, and that this is how it was going to end me. Now, you asked a while ago what happened. What stuck in my mind visually was when we did that 180, that 90 degree, and I could see the wing and the ground, and all happened real fast and quick, yeah. You're taking in a lot of information real fast.
I went back to the cockpit and really cussed him out. And then I saw the plane started to nose in here, but it was 52-degree angle. When I saw it do that, I know we wasn't gonna make that field. And I said, see what you done? We're not gonna make it. And I hope both of you 2 guys survive this, because I'm gonna kill both of you with my bare knuckles.
Then silence.
It's dead quiet. Everybody's, doing praying. I mean, I'll tell you what, it takes you about 45 seconds to become a born-again Christian. I guarantee you, when you're 9,000 feet in the air and you run out of gas, all right? Everybody is, thank you, Jesus.
I remember the last thing I remember was like going down and hitting the trees. Just sit.
It's still raw.
I said trees and started going, bah, 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 so I started to run back to my seat, which I only got a couple of steps. And where the plane opened up at that point, wherever I was at, when all the crushing impact, I went through that fuselage up under the very engine that was having the problem.
The crash killed 6 people. The pilot, co-pilot, the band's assistant manager, Dean Kilpatrick, backup singer, Casey Gaines, her brother, guitarist Steve Gaines, and Lynyrd Skynyrd founder and lead singer, Ronnie Van Zant. Volunteer Fire Chief Jamie Wall was first at the scene.
Stuart Hentpill lives in Gillsboro. He saw the plane come over his house, and he called me as fire chief, said he called Macomb, said a plane did crash. So we called out the fire. I just told my wife, I said, start calling out the fire department. So the plane crashed. I said, I'm gonna get my truck and go looking. Well, I knew it was heading towards Macomb, so I just started towards Macomb. I saw the helicopter. When I saw the helicopter, I knew what was going on.
Getting to the crash site on land was difficult through the thick forest.
It was light in the field enough to see, but it was dark in the woods. But you could see up in the woods because of the helicopter. At the time, it was just one, but two eventually was here. When I saw it was a big plane, I got down on my hands and knees and prayed for help. I was the first one here. When I went around the plane, I stumbled over somebody, talked to him, put a hunting coat on him, come around the plane and stumbled over somebody else. But I'm looking for the wings to make sure there ain't no gas.
Right.
When I realized there wasn't no wings and gas, I felt safe, and I circled the plane.
His only tools were a flashlight and a hatchet.
The front of the plane's upside down. You couldn't see the windows or the doors. So I climbed up on the plane. And I always thought this story was interesting. There was a crack in the plane. I stuck my fingers in that crack and poked somebody in the eye. He's alive. He's between the bottom of the plane and the floor. The plane's upside down.
Right.
He's under the floor towards the bottom.
Wow.
I had a hatchet and I started chopping, and I chopped the hole.
The man he pulled out was Mark Howard, who was going in and out of consciousness. The two only made that connection when Mark returned to the crash scene for the first time in 40 years.
Amazing. Can I see your hatchet?
Take it, too.
Man, amazing.
He said, I can remember seeing you. He said, I could touch your face. He said, I remember pulling you out, and they had to pull me out from my shoulders up to the top. And when they pulled me out, it hurt so bad that I woke up. I was knocked unconscious, but it hurt. Somehow I just woke up, and I remember screaming. And he told me about it. He said, I remember you screaming. And I remember that. That's probably really the last thing I remember. Then I was out again.
Mark was airlifted to Jackson.
I had a massive head injury, and it was like this, and I went back around, and I had a broken clavicle as well.
He also had a broken hip, which has resulted in 17 hip replacements since then. Mark Frank's injuries were less severe. Soon after the crash, Mark, along with drummer Artemis Pyle and stagehand Kenny Peden, set out on foot to find help.
So here I am now in the middle of nowhere, kind of following Artemis in this pitch black, you know, but it's like, I wasn't worried about nothing. It's like I didn't care, you know, but there was a shock more than anything else, you know, so it took me a little bit to kind of figure out exactly what happened. There was probably a period of 25, 30 seconds when I really couldn't see anybody. Artemis was ahead of me. Kenny was fairly close. But there was a little period of time where I thought maybe I might be transitioning from here to there. I mean, it wasn't spooky, but I couldn't see anybody, couldn't hear anybody. And that's probably most eerie.
Meanwhile, Gene was under the plane with massive injuries.
When I went through the fuselage, I hit on my head, and I had a massive hole in my head, huge, massive hole. And it crushed all the vertebrae, compression fracture, crushed 5 and compression fractured everything. I'm actually about 1 inch shorter than I was before the plane crash because of all the compression fractures. And I'm the only person that got burnt of any kind of burn injury.
It wasn't from fire. The plane had no fuel.
Had holes burning in my wrist, back here on my face, a big hole burnt inside of my head, and melted this eye.
It was a flare that burned him.
Inside that wing, somewhere in that compartment, that flare partially ignited, and it was dripping that phosphorus on me while I was laying underneath there. And I had a couple cornea grafts after that, and they both didn't work, and the eye just exploded, and they had to take it out. And they did plastic surgery on this after 18 months. Scar tissue stopped scarring. They took a bunch of skin off my leg and did plastic surgery.
Doctors were shocked Gene was even alive with such a massive head injury.
But I had such a horrible, horrible head injury. And the neurosurgeon said, you should have never survived an impact on the head like that, you know. And you're going to have multiple surgeries over the years, and I've had. Everything's all fused together here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is all fused, and there's plates in my neck and my back. I just had back surgery again in February, and my whole spine just fell apart.
But what came together was everyone near the crash site in Gillsburg, Mississippi. It's just a few miles from the Louisiana border. Bobby McDaniel owns the adjoining property where the plane went down. He came immediately.
I was helping get the guys out of the plane. I remained on the ground the whole time. I never got in the plane. But we were laying them out kind of how they were injured as well as the deceased. And there was no gurney. There was no stretcher of any type. And finally, one stretcher showed up, an old Army stretcher, green Army stretcher, and or gurney, as they would call it. And we started taking them, the injured out one by one on that one single stretcher. I'm not exactly sure how many of the survivors I took out, but when it came to the deceased, I did take three of them and put them in the back of a pickup truck. We'd put hay in the back of the pickup truck, and we treated them very respectfully, laid them in the back of the truck for them to leave and go to Macomb, to the morgue.
It was hours before Bobby or any of the rescuers knew who the victims were.
A friend of mine ran up to me. He was several years younger, but he said, Bobby, that's Lynyrd Skynyrd's plane. And it was the first that I knew who was in the plane. I'd been working with them for several hours. I never asked, I never cared. I just knew why, I was there for that reason.
The reason for the crash? It ran out of gas. Investigators blame the pilots for ignoring the fuel gauges. At 4,500 feet, the Conair 240 went into a free fall. As it dropped out of the sky, it cut a 500-foot path through these treetops in about 15 seconds.
The plane come from this direction. And when it came in through the trees, the wings got sheared off. And when it hit the ground here, it broke in two and twisted. The top part of the plane is upside down and hit a tree. The tree was right out here. And it kind of bent the plane just a little bit. Tail section stayed upright. But the top part was upside down.
Not long after the crash, landowner Dwayne Easley found this.
A couple of weeks after the plane crash was removed and everything, he was like bush hogging his land. He's like, he hit something. And he's like, what is this? And he gets out, and the door of the plane.
That was found even before Gene found out Ronnie was dead. The two were best friends since childhood.
They didn't even tell me Ronnie died for all the weeks I was in the hospital. I didn't find out Ronnie died until I got out of the hospital. And my girlfriend and my ex-wife was driving me. That was the first place I was going to see Ronnie. Come on, we'll go take you to see Ronnie. And they would drive me out. I thought we were going to Ronnie's house, but we went to the cemetery, and they pulled in the cemetery. What the hell are you doing here? This is where Ronnie's at, and that's the first time I knew that he was dead. And that was extremely devastating.
So was going back to the crash site. Gene went 4 weeks later, but it took decades for others, even rescuers like Bobby.
It took 25 years for me to come back. And I would come back late in the evening, about crash site time, and I would bring me 2 beers. And I would drink 1 beer and set it down and leave the other beer for Ronnie.
Mark Howard didn't come back until last year on the 40th anniversary of the crash.
Came down, and then we drove down to the clearing area where you have to walk through the brush and all, and he said, man, you ready for this? And I said, I don't know. I really don't know. So, but anyway, I did. I walked through, and when I got there, it made up for like 40 years of pain.
5 years after the crash, Mark Frank started reconnecting folks here.
These guys, I didn't know them anything legally. but morally, I owed them a thank you. So it took me 4 or 5 years to start finding them up, and if I'm not careful, I'll tear up. You know, but one by one, I owed them a thank you. So that's what kind of got all this started, you know, and then I become friends with these guys.
I want to be here every year. You know, these first responders, you know, they're the real rock stars of everything. And it's not just those guys, it's the guys that drove the ambulances, the guys that blocked traffic, all of them. They all played a part in making sure we're still here to be alive to tell this story. So, you know, they all deserve everything. You know, we owe our lives to all of them.
Lives banded together on this tree, much like the world is to the band's music.
There's just something biblical when you drive down the road and you hear the intro to Sweet Home Alabama, the introduction of that song. It's gone, those licks. They actually said the song is so powerful it doesn't even need words, because when you hear you know what it is.
Gene took the history of the band and turned it into a book. Scott Ennis turned it into a song.
Waved goodbye to Greenville as they all boarded that plane. Destination Baton Rouge, but that was all about to change when that conveyor started struggling and soon gave up the fight. A southern rock band from Florida became legends overnight. No help from miles around, no consolation to be found. There's a swamp near Gillsburg, Mississippi, some call sacred ground. It sits back in a lonely place where the world came crashing down. Behind a no trespassing sign where few have ever been. Some swear every nightfall you can hear free bird in the wind.
The door of the plane, it's been turned into works of art for charity. Scott gave Gene one last weekend on the 41st anniversary of the crash.
Man, I really appreciate this, but I don't want to take your memento.
No, you got it.
We're giving it to you. That is yours.
You rode that piece of plane right there. You need to.
On the 10th anniversary, surviving members of the crash reformed for a Lynyrd Skynyrd reunion tour with Ronnie Van Zant's younger brother as lead vocalist. 31 years later, they're still together.
A lot of people give the current Lynyrd Skynyrd a lot of grief. Oh, it's a karaoke band, you know. But there's a lot of people with a lot of stories, family, friends that rode that plane down that are still in that band. And you know, it's not so much what you bring to the stage, it's what you bring to the stage from your heart. And those guys have lived it, okay? It's their kinfolk, it's their story. And so when they step on the stage and they're singing Sweet Home Alabama or Free Bird or whatever the case may be, that's Lynyrd Skynyrd. So, long live Lynyrd Skynyrd.
If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? I must be traveling on now, 'cause there's too many places I've got to see.
More of Weekends with Whitney after this.
Out of the chaos.
Thanks for sharing part of your day with us here on Weekends with Whitney. We hope to see you back here again next week. Until then, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a great week ahead. We leave you with this.